Let's take a look at something called directive modifiers. Directive modifiers are special postfixes that are denoted by a dot, indicating that a directive should be bound in some special way. The modifiers that are related to events are referred to as event modifiers. And yeah, I know what you're probably thinking. That sounds fancy and all, but what does it actually mean? While modifiers are not limited to events, let's take a look at event modifiers, as these are easy to grasp. So right now I have a div element with a nested button, both having a click event handler, which simply invokes a method that shows an alert. If I click the button and close the first alert, notice that a second alert is shown. This is because the click event for the button element propagates up the DOM and thereby triggers the click event on the div element as well. This wouldn't matter if we didn't have an event handler on the div element, but in this case we do. We can disable this default behavior by using an event modifier that corresponds to calling event.stopPropagation in JavaScript. We could actually do this too, but embedding that kind of DOM logic into our methods is probably not the best way to go. Instead, we can use the stop event modifier, which does exactly that, so let's see it in action. So I'll just enter .stop after the name of the event. So notice the syntax, I simply added a dot followed by the name of the modifier after the name of the event. If we try again, we'll see that only one alert is shown this time, which is the one triggered by the click event on the button. Because of our modifier, event propagation is stopped from here, and thus the click event on the div element is ignored. I'll just remove the div element before moving on to the next example. Like so. For whatever reason, we might want to trigger an event only once. This can be accomplished with the once modifier. If I replace the stop modifier with the once modifier, we should see that the alert is only displayed once, regardless of how many times we click the button. So let's try it out. So now that I clicked the button the first time, we do see the alert, but if I click it again, you will see that the alert is no longer displayed. What if we add an event listener to an event, but we don't want the browser to perform the default action? Perhaps we don't want to submit a form when clicking a submit button, or maybe we don't want the browser to navigate to a URL within the href property of a link. Let's take the latter example and see how we can accomplish that. So if I add a link that points to google.com, and I'll add the same click event handler as before, so v_on:click and show dialog. I'll set the target to blank, and let's just give it some text. So with this link, we'll see that the browser first shows an alert and then navigates to the link's URL. Note that the reason I added a target of _blank to the link is for the link to work with JS Fiddle, so it has nothing to do with vue.js. If I want to prevent the browser from opening the URL, I can use the prevent modifier. This is the same as calling events.preventDefault in JavaScript. So I'll just add a period here after the click event name, and I'll add prevent, which is the name of the modifier. So let's test it out. We still see the alert, but notice that the browser no longer sends us off to Google. If we just wanted to prevent the default browser action from occurring when clicking the button, we could actually completely leave out the vue.on directives expression. So let's just try to delete it, which is this part. And let's test that it still works by clicking the link. And indeed it still works because we're no longer sent to Google. So the only thing this does is the equivalent of calling event.preventDefault in JavaScript. So if you use some event modifier, meaning that you don't need the expression, then you can simply leave it out. Before ending this video, I just want to mention that modifiers can be chained by simply separating the modifiers with dots. I'll get back to that in the next video though. There are other modifiers too, but these are the ones we need for now. I'll include a link to an overview of event modifiers in a few lectures, but for now, let's move on to talking about something called key modifiers.